Human variability. The peoples of the Imperium vary in their form and appearances just as their homeworlds do. Whilst there is a generally agreed baseline human standard, consisting of 4 limbs, 1 head, 20 digits and so on, the local environment and genetic stock have caused all manner of interesting anomalies, evolutionary adaptations, and fashions. These differences are usually cosmetic in effect. However, the more radical alterations walk the line between accepted variation and outright mutation. It is a subject of intense debate amongst some Inquisitors, and indeed the priests of the Ecclesiarchy, on what it is to be human and therefore accepted into the Imperium. Certain planets will betray the colonial origins with the appearance of their peoples, perhaps a particular type of nose or skin color will be dominant. Others will have clear tribal divisions. Some populations will possess unusual adaptations as a consequence of their local environment. The folk of the Agri-world Dreah, for example, have a grey skin, hair and eye tone, which exactly matches the flora, fauna, sky, and waters of their notoriously dull planet. Some cultures may impose certain ideals of beauty that drastically alter the looks of their peoples. Certainly, many strange and terrible gangs of Underhivers have been discovered, clad in hyper-fashionable armor, sporting glowing Electoos, skull studs, gang tribal mutilations and shiv scars with pride. To some extent, a similar appearance and culture bind the people of a planet together into common stock. Usually speaking, citizens of the Imperium will prefer to spend their time with fellow natives of their world. That said, however, mankind has ever been titillated by the exotic, so friendship, love affairs, and even children with off-worlders is not unknown on planets with a culture that legitimizes such travel. Rebellion. The Imperial Creed maintains that all of humanity must be brought and kept within the Imperium where men and women can benefit from the rule of the Emperor. Several imperial organizations are permanently occupied with suppressing any possibility of rebellion before it has a chance of developing. The common worship of the god Emperor holds mankind together and instills loyalty towards the Imperium. Rebellions and uprisings on imperial planets nonetheless remain a constant problem. The nature and causes of a rebellion can fall into several categories. The government of an imperial world may decide to secede from the Imperium. A popular uprising may attempt to overthrow the local imperial government. In the most insidious of cases, the rebellion may be brought about by alien or chaos influence. In the more prosaic cases, however, a new planetary government established through a rebellion is not necessarily opposed by the Imperium, so long as it accedes fully to imperial authority and pays its tithes to Terra. Besides the pursuit of outright war, there are many ways a rebellious world may be brought back into the Imperium. With the existence of its more secretive organs like the Inquisition, the Imperium is fully capable of carrying out covert methods of restoring imperial rule, including assassination, popular agitation, economic sabotage, and terrorism. Sometimes a rebellion can be subdued by the removal of a single individual. Pro-imperial groups or other anti-government forces can be infiltrated or supported as required. Imperial languages. Low Gothic is the common language of the Imperium, spoken on most imperial planets as a first or second language. Imperial worlds have inevitably developed their own, often highly variant, dialects of Low Gothic over time. High Gothic, fictionally represented as a form of Latinized English, dates from the last time humanity was united across interstellar distances in an ancient confederation that existed during the Dark Age of technology, long before the age of the Imperium, and is used solely as a hieratic language by the divisions of the Adeptus Terra, the Inquisition and the Ecclesiarchy. Low Gothic, also called Imperial Gothic, or simply Gothic, is the official language of the Imperium, the everyday language of its adepts and of Terra. Most worlds have been a part of the Imperium for long enough to have adopted Low Gothic as a universal language, but there are still a great many feral worlds on which Imperial Gothic is not spoken. Inevitably, dialects of Gothic differ from world to world and can be mutually unintelligible. Older planets frequently maintained the archaic language of their own, to the extent that ruling aristocracies might only know enough Low Gothic to be sworn into their imperial offices. For highly formal matters, the Adeptus Terra use High Gothic, the related precursor language of Imperial Gothic. Many Ecclesiarchy rituals, administratum edicts, and imperial charters use this ancient and venerable language. Psychers in the Imperium. Humans with psychic powers, known colloquially as psychers, who possess abilities ranging from telepathy to pyrokinesis, have existed since the dawn of mankind's existence as a species during the Paleolithic Age on Old Earth, but the position in the Imperium is an uncomfortable one at best. An untrained psyker is an unguarded gateway to the warp, through which psychic predators like demons and enslavers can enter real space and wreak havoc. It is said that whole worlds have been lost to hideous monsters of the Empyrean, while rogue psykers have committed horrible crimes with the powers or led dangerous and destructive cults. On some worlds, all psykers are tried as witches, subjected to tortuous ordeals and burned at the stake when their inevitable guilt is proven. Imperial law requires all worlds to monitor its psykers and subject them for testing by the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. Those who are strong enough to withstand the perils of the warp are forced to endure the soul binding and are trained to serve the Imperium as sanctioned psykers. Those who are too weak are taken away by the black ships and never seen again, their lives used to maintain the Emperor's strength within the warp and power the Astronomicon. Travel in the Imperium. Interstellar travel between the worlds of the Imperium is rare and dangerous. The vast majority of civilians will never know the roaring tedium of shuttle flight, the sickening plummet of a drop pod, or the unnerving silence of deep space. Given the huge size of the Imperium, it is impossible to cross it in the fleeting span of time given to ordinary men. Colonists, pilgrims, and refugees spend many generations in the vastness of space, and many starships never survive the vagaries of travel to reach the destination. Sublight travel. Used mostly for journeys between planets or closely neighboring star systems, sublight travel involves speeds that confound mortal imagination and yet are still nothing when measured against the sheer size of the galaxy. Those attempting to use slower-than-light drives to travel any appreciable distance condemn themselves and their descendants to shipboard life, endlessly whittling away the Terran years until they arrive at the distant star they set out to reach. The average Imperial citizen is unlikely to experience slower-than-light space travel. Even those individuals living within a star system with plentiful void ships for interplanetary travel are likely to prefer the world of the birth over distant places with strange customs, odd food and funny-looking people. In many places, space travel is reserved for the privileged few who can afford to maintain the rituals, priests and shrines that such voidcraft require, as well as the vast cost of the starships themselves. Tech priests do what they can to sate the machine spirits of these spacecraft, but often even their unfathomable law is not enough to prevent these temperamental ships from venting their rage and oxygen, to the detriment of passengers. Sheer odds dictate that sooner or later those that frequently travel in ships between planets will experience such a disaster. Those worlds that have not lost the art of creating and maintaining slower-than-light starships jealously guard their arcane craft. This reluctance to share the guild secrets ensures the reliability and price of their vessels, but also robs others of vital information required to placate their own craft. Institutions such as the Imperial Navy, the Inquisition, and various Adepto have access to much better quality vessels, maintained with religious awe and reverence by countless generations of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Warp travel. For the warp is a strange and terrible place. You might as well throw a traveler into a sea of sharks and tell him to swim home as send him through the warp unprotected. Better it is not to let common man travel through the stars. Better still, let him now know such a thing is feasible. Fra Safrain, 5th Aid to Navigator Darrell. Comment made prior to the departure of the second mission to search for the missing freighter Pride of Angelus. To move any appreciable distance within the Imperium, voyages must make use of warp travel. This method of faster-than-light travel is rare, expensive and dangerous, as it requires the use of the unpredictable realm known as the warp, or the Imperium. Vessels equipped with a functional warp drive are able to translate themselves into this other dimension of being that coexists with the material universe by generating an envelope of protective Geller fields. The warp drive bends the starship through the veil of real space into the Imperium. Once within this strange hyperdimensional realm, the starship is able to ride the currents and eddies that flow within the warp, frequently dropping back into real space to check its positioning. The Imperium is a bizarre and contradictory place, entirely unnatural to mankind or any being of real space. Looking upon the warp unprotected causes madness and chaos corruption, and thus is greatly feared by almost everyone in the Imperium. Dimensions, colors, forces, and emotions operate entirely differently within the warp's embrace, and this can drive even the most thick-headed crewman insane. Psychers, of course, find such travel even more disturbing as their mystical senses are able to comprehend much more of the Imperium and the foul creatures that dwell within it. Those that travel through the warp emerge to discover another of its disconcerting effects. Time does not operate normally within this other realm, and so travelers can emerge to discover that Terran centuries have passed in real space since they started the journey, that they have merely been absent for a few solar seconds, or have even arrived before they left. Even skilled navigators cannot predict how much time will be lost, gained or repeated over the course of a journey. Those that embark upon warp travel know that they will probably never return home, or that if they do so they will find it so changed that it is unrecognizable. When two or more captains of starships meet, they invariably trade dates, attempting to reconstruct the time they are missing or have gained. Needless to say, warp travel is not embarked upon lightly. The warp is occasionally prone to great turbulence or storms of activity. These strike at random and last for an unpredictable amount of time. Whilst these warp storms rage, any vessels within are tossed about on roiling currents, sometimes being spat out at random locations. Other ships simply become trapped, unable to translate back into real space, cursed to eternity upon the waves of the warp. These storms disrupt communication across the Imperium and can sometimes herald a great disaster within real space, as they did during the Age of Strife before the birth of the Chaos God, Slanesh, during the fall of the Eldar. Imperial communications. Just as travel within the Imperium is a complicated and inexact science, so too is the business of exchanging messages between the many and varied planets that make up the Imperium. Planetary communication systems such as radio-based voxcasters, hardwired telegraph, and telephone lines and the more advanced vox communicators suffice to pass messages amongst the nations of a world, yet have almost no use beyond the bounds of the planet's surface. Such devices can require many Terran years for the signal to reach even the nearest planet of a star system and have no surety of even being detected when they arrive. The perils of travel ensure that human or servitor messengers are just as unreliable and potentially as slow as radio or other energy wave communications. The Imperium is forced to rely upon communication by psychic or astro-telepathic means. Astropaths communicate with symbols and iconic images, projecting these messages through vast distances of space by means of psychic power drawn from the warp. This process is usually exhausting and requires ritual and focus in order to keep the psyker in the right frame of mind. These can take a wide variety of forms, such as the use of the Emperor's Tarot, vision quests, automatic writing, trances, seances and the like. The jailist astropaths of Redden, for example, spend many years etching their messages onto painstakingly illuminated sheets of iron and then destroy the work of art upon a massive grinding wheel when they are ready to transmit the information. The pain of annihilating much-loved labor is said to produce psychic messages of unparalleled clarity. These messages are received by fellow astropaths in various ways. Some appear as vague and troubling dreams, whilst others appear as visions on mystic portents. Others appear within whatever ritual method or divination technique the receiving psyker happens to practice. Thus, warning of an orc invasion might appear as a glistening imperfection in fish entrails, a looming cloud of smoke, bleeding orifices, or a worrying combination of runes or sigils within a holographic matrix. Astropathic messages must not only be transmitted from one astropath to another but decoded at the other end. Each astropath employs slightly different symbols and each has a preferred style or flavor. Some messages take solar weeks of poring over tomes of augurs and symbolism before they can be reconstructed, though the best astropaths can do this word for word. Some messages take solar weeks of poring over tomes of augurs and symbolism before they can be reconstructed, though the best astropaths can do this word for word. Some messages take solar weeks of poring over tomes of augurs and symbolism before they can be reconstructed, though the best astropaths can do this word for word. Some remain a mystery forever. Some messages are received by astropaths at entirely the wrong end of the galaxy and must be passed on to others who are nearer the place in question. Some messages simply do not get to their intended recipient or are drastically misinterpreted along the way. In addition, there are too few astropaths. Most worlds, especially those with small populations or on the fringes of the Imperium, have no astropaths at all and must rely on the infrequent visits of passing chartist ships or administratum census takers to make contact with the outside galaxy at all. For this reason, the Adeptus Terra cannot react quickly to every event in the Imperium, even when an event occurs that is great enough to attract the notice of the vast and ponderous imperial bureaucracy. On most worlds, the Imperium feels very far away. Imperial calendar. The Imperium of Man uses a special imperial dating system derived from the original Gregorian calendar of Old Earth that denotes the current year by the notation, the year of the millennium. Capital M for the millennium. For example, the year 40,999 AD would be represented as 999. Capital M 41, while 41,002 would be 002. Capital M 42 and the year 2018 would be 018. Capital M 3. However, the year 41,000 AD would be 000. Capital M 41, since the new millennium starts at the year 001 and has no year 0. In the wake of the resurrection of the Primarch Robert Guilliman and his return to the position of Lord Commander of the Imperium in 999. Capital M 41, he discovered that the imperial calendar had become degraded by both dogmatic adherence and thoughtless revisionism. Various rival dating systems had evolved from the imperial standard, making a true, accurate chronicle of the galaxy almost impossible to construct. As the Indomitus Crusade drew to a close around what once would have been considered 111. Capital M 42, Guilliman calculated the current year by the 5 main factional variants of the imperial calendar to be anywhere between the early 41st millennium and an entire millennium later. And that was leaving out the numerous lesser, more heretical interpretations. As a result, most dates given in the 41st millennium should be considered unreliable or approximations at best in relation to the period of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, and many have argued that the Imperium is still in the midst of the late 41st millennium.